Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Ella Ward joining me today. Hi Ella.
Hello, everybody.
So, a little bit about Ella. Ella is an Aussie mum, wife, advertising boss lady, and sometimes freelance writer. She's also, unfortunately, one of those cancer people. Her words have been published in places like Frankie, Lunch Lady, and The Age, as well as online on sites including Mamamia, Wim, and Kidspot. Ella's currently oversharing here down the shops, at the hairdresser, anywhere near other people, and of course on Instagram. So thanks, Ella, for joining us. And Ella's book is 27 Letters to My Daughter, which I've got my copy here.
There it is.
And just wanted to also mention that thanks to HarperCollins, anyone watching now who asks a question during the Facebook Live will have a chance to win a copy of 27 Letters to My Daughter. So thanks, Ella, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us about 27 Letters to My Daughter.
Yeah, I'd love to. I tell people that it's a time-traveling memoir. And then the next question they always say is, well, is it fiction? I say, no, it's actually non-fiction. So it is 27 Letters to My Daughter, and written to her around the time that I was diagnosed with cancer. But I decided that I didn't just want to write letters to her. I also wanted to tell her a bit of a story of life and love and the family that I came from. So I've also taken letters from 4 generations above me of letters from my own
really
family.
amazing,
And and I'm very lucky that I've got them. And I sewed them through the book. And they are sad letters, but they're also, there's a lot of fun, parties, good recipes, and all sorts of the other important things that you want to leave someone whenever you happen to depart this earth.
And it is like a really emotional book reading it, and when you know the story behind why you wrote it and that as well. But I did find there was a bit of humour in it as well.
I don't think I can't really do much without a bit of humour. It's definitely something that's probably stood me in the best stead more than any other emotion or reaction. So there's absolutely no way that I could have written these letters without a laugh, particularly in the face of something as crazy as cancer. I definitely think that you need to have a smile on your face sometimes, even in those darkest of moments.
And how amazing that you had those letters from your past grandparents and great-great-grandparents and
Yeah, I know. I actually, because my grandmother's still around, she's 96, and she's in a nursing home a couple of hours out of Melbourne. And so as I was writing the book, I was in email contact with her a lot because it was lockdown, so I couldn't go see her in her nursing home. But as she put it to me, we come from a family of people who thought they were important enough to write it all down. And I think thought is the important word here, because we're not an important family, we're just an average family. But I definitely come from a long line of people who like telling stories at dinner parties. And luckily for me, they decided to write down those stories in the forms of letters and memoirs. And, she was definitely the record keeper, so it meant that I had a lot of material to go on. So I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah. And as I said, like, it's a really personal thing that you've written. When you started out, did you think that you would get it published?
No, I really did start them as letters to my kid. I was never diagnosed with a terminal cancer. I was very lucky. I was diagnosed at stage 3, and all of my treatment team were very optimistic and said, we're going to get you through this. But I'm a bit of a drama queen and a pessimist. And then when you throw cancer into the mix, I was like, oh my God, I need to write down my stories. So I started the letters as genuine letters just to leave for my daughter. And I thought, well, if the cancer doesn't carry me off, at least it'll be left in a dusty corner of the internet somewhere. And if I get hit by a bus one day, then she'll have those. But it wasn't until probably two or 3 years later that I started to really think about how they might come together as a book that other people might want to read and not just my kid.
And then how did you go about getting it published? How hard or easy did you find that?
I was thinking about this question today, Jackie, because I had a feeling you might ask me that. And I thought I had a really hard time getting any of those articles published that you mentioned at the top there. I just worked and hustled and cold pitched, and no one was interested in a word I had to say. So I just kept finding email addresses of publications and newspapers and editors, and I just kept pitching over and over and over, whether it was a story about my cancer or my daughter or my ancestors. So I tried very hard at that to get an article published. Luckily, I did. I got 2 articles published, one in The Age and one in the Sydney Morning Herald, about a year apart. And it was the second article that was actually spied by my publisher at HarperCollins, or who then became my publisher. And that's when my luck, I think, really turned. And she actually contacted me, which, as time goes on, I think I realised just how lucky I was that happened. And it was probably another 18 months until I received a contract after that conversation. But I do think that if I hadn't have pushed so hard to get the articles up, then there's no way I would have been able to eventually turn that into a story, because no one would have been able to read my words.
So at the time, like, had you always been aware of those letters from your past generations?
Yeah, I had, but in like typical 20-something fashion, I was basically a bit of a self-obsessed jerk and didn't think they were very interesting. I've got letters from my great-grandfather that were written from the front in World War One, and I think I received copies of them when I was about 23 or 24, and I read them, and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Put them on a shelf, didn't think about them for another 15 years. So yeah, they've always been floating around sort of in the periphery, but it wasn't until I really started to dig down into them and actually start to draw links between all the different stories that I could then get in contact with my extended family, and that's when more stuff started to come out that I didn't know existed. Particularly around my great-grandmother, who was born in 1895 or 1897, and she had a lot of stories to tell, but I didn't have copies of those until well into writing the book. So that was an amazing moment when that email turned up. I thought, oh my, it was like she'd knocked on the door and said, well, come on, where are you going to put me in there too?
Yeah, no, it must be very amazing to find all that stuff, yeah. And I'm just wondering, when you first started writing those letters, how old was your daughter?
She was in prep. So I was diagnosed with a squamous cell carcinoma in 2018, and she was 6. And it was that year that I was noodling around with the letters. But it wasn't until she probably was closer to 8 or 9 that I really was working on the book itself. So, there was, luckily for me, she was young enough at the beginning of that process that she didn't really know what was going on. She's 10 now, and I don't know if anyone here has a 10-year-old, but there's no way that I could keep anything from her at the moment. So I was lucky with the timing.
And Sharon wonders if your daughter's ever read any of the letters.
It's a good question. I've actually read them to her. This was a very risky move, but hopefully it's paid off. So obviously, writing a book called 27 Letters to Your Daughter, she's pretty curious as to what they are. There are a couple of letters in there that are not appropriate for a 10-year-old or probably even a 15-year-old to read. And so we struck a bit of a deal, which is I would read the book to her. And that allowed me to do a little bit of self-editing on the way, maybe even skip over a few chapters. And so far it's worked, because I think that she was a little bit bored by a lot of it. And that's the greatest thing at all, is to just make her think that it's actually not worth picking up and flicking through it. I thought the minute that I told her that she wasn't allowed to touch it or she wasn't allowed to read it, then she would have been clambering all over the house.
And Sina wonders, what have you liked the most about your book?
Oh, that's such a great question. I don't know if anyone's ever had that experience where you don't know what you think or feel until you say it, until you say it out loud to a friend or maybe write it in an email. And I think that the process of going through writing such a personal book, which most people haven't had the opportunity or the privilege of being able to sit down and dedicate time to, has meant that I've really enjoyed putting some things into words that I've never put into words before. You know, my feelings about love or fear, or even just giving people advice about work. So that's been a real delight. And then, of course, getting into the really juicy details about some of my grandparents and great-grandparents, that's been super fun as well.
And what about reader feedback? I could imagine you'd have people who might have been in similar experiences, or
it's been really interesting. I developed quite an intense and really special relationship actually with quite a large group of, I guess, cancer patients and family of cancer patients on my Instagram when I was first diagnosed, and I found that to be a community that was really helpful for me. And so I found that, you know, in terms of the feedback from those people who are in that position, is it can be a bit scary to start reading because you worry that it's going to be a traumatic or a sad read. But actually the feedback that I've enjoyed the most is how funny and I think optimistic people have found the book. So that's really filled me up. I've also, this is really exciting, I've had a few people contact me with really amazing stories. One woman had never seen the flower bougainvillea before.
Oh, okay.
She lived, I think she lives in Canada. Anyway, and so she read about bougainvillea in the book and she Googled it, and then she'd done the most beautiful oil painting of bougainvillea based on my book. And I just thought, oh my God, it's amazing. And then the most incredible thing happened just 2 days ago. I got an email from a woman asking if she could use some of my grandfather's love letters in her wedding vows.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so that sort of personal connection is just, it's blowing my mind. Still, I'm really excited.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned a few different countries. Has it been published in other countries, or?
Not yet.
No,
so because I've got a really great little community on Instagram, a lot of people have actually picked up the Kindle and the ebook and the audiobook overseas where it is available. And then the paperback is coming out in the States and the UK in January.
Okay. No, that's great. Yeah. And just wanted to remind people watching that if you do have a question for Ella, please type it in comments and I can read it out. And thanks to HarperCollins, you'll have a chance to win a copy of 27 Letters to My Daughter. I'm wondering, what are you doing next?
Oh, I'm having such a good time. I'm writing a novel.
Can you tell us about that?
Oh, it's a totally different kettle of fish because you can just make up the story instead of have to try and stick to the facts. So I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm just bumbling my way through, but I'm halfway through my first draft. And I've got a deadline in my head that I'm aiming for. And it's just so much fun. I think that I'll probably regret having this much fun when I actually have to go back and edit it. But it's a very different writing experience to doing something that is obviously full of facts.
And are you able to share with us what sort of genre that is?
Yes, but I don't know what to call it. It's sort of, I think it's like a modern Australian romance with a little bit of magical realism sprinkled around the edges. You know, I love those sorts of books. I love books where I'm reading a story and I think I know what's going to happen, and then suddenly I get taken right around the corner and back again. So yeah, there's a touch of mystery and definitely a little bit of magic, but at the core of it, it's about a 40-year-old woman who is trying to rediscover herself after some pretty traumatic stuff has happened to her.
Oh, sounds interesting. And what about reading yourself? What sort of things do you like to read? And maybe is there something you might have read lately you'd like to recommend to us?
I have very strange reading tastes, Jackie. So when I was writing non-fiction, I found that I just wanted to read fiction. I wanted to read light fiction that was fun and a bit sort of juicy. So just recently I finished Sex and Vanity by Kevin Kwan, and he wrote Crazy Rich Asians, which is just so much fun to read. And it's also deceptively very, now that I'm writing a novel, I think, blimey, this is a very cleverly put together construct. But then right over onto the other scale, because now I'm working on fiction, I've actually just finished a fantastic non-fiction book called The Victorian City. Okay. And it is about Victorian London, but it's told in a way where it's communicating facts, but in the most engaging way, where it sort of talks about the smells of the buns roasting in Covent Garden and, what it would felt like to walk into the city on a frosty morning. So I'm just sort of mixing it up at the moment. Definitely recommend those two, though.
Yeah, no, thanks for those recommendations. And could you tell us the experience of writing your letters? Is that something that you found really helped you and you'd encourage people to do that?
Yes. It's probably one of the questions I've received most, or not questions, maybe statements from people as they say, oh, I'd love to be able to write letters to my kids, but I just don't know where to start. And I do feel a huge sense of relief that it's down there and it's done. But what I would say to someone who says, I just don't know where to start, is don't freak yourself out by having to start at the big stuff. You don't need to sit down with a blank piece of paper and think, right, now I'm going to write about love. Or the meaning of life, So I actually pulled together, I think there are 30 questions that people can use as prompts to begin writing letters. And they are things like, have you ever had a speeding ticket? Do you call yourself a good driver? What sort of perfume would you wear to a party if I was to invite you tomorrow? So all these little prompts that, it's funny, once you start explaining those answers, then the big stuff inevitably sort of comes from behind.
And have you put those questions somewhere where people can see them?
Yes, they're on my website, which is ellaward.com.au. So go crazy. You can download them and do whatever you want with them.
No, sounds great. And what do you hope readers will love about your book?
I think that one of the things that I wouldn't wish this upon anyone, but I can tell you that if anyone's been through the process of having cancer or any other life-threatening illness, you do gain a really special sense of perspective. And it allows you to look through the world in a pretty special little filter. And the book focuses on sort of normal, maybe boring things, but that take on a certain magic and a certain glow. And I hope that if anyone takes anything from this book, I hope that they would finish it and realise that maybe their life is filled with those simple, beautiful, glowing things as well. And it's just a matter of shifting your perspective a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. And what have you found to be your favourite part of the publishing journey?
That's a really good question, because I think I was so naive about the whole process. I just bumbled into it. I mean, I've worked in advertising for 21 years. I'm not a publishing person at all. And I think that that's what I enjoyed the most, honestly, is when you've been doing the same job for 2 decades, you're pretty clear about what's going to happen next in in any certain conversation. Whereas in this process, my favourite thing about everything is how new it is and how fun it is to not know stuff and to be able to ask questions and say, well, where does the cover come from and what happens next? And is this a good thing or a bad thing? So it definitely makes you feel younger, that's for sure, to have no idea what the hell's going on.
And what sort of feedback have you received from family?
Everyone has been very polite. I gave there were a number of people in the book, as you'd know, who quite heavily, and I gave them all rights of reply. I gave them the manuscript quite early on and asked if there was anything they wanted to object to. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And I think, and everyone was very gracious. I think everyone's just delighted that someone else has taken the burden of telling the family story and they don't have to anymore.
And Belinda wonders if you have a set writing routine and a favourite place to write.
Yeah, my husband and I were chatting about this the other day because he's working from home at the moment. And he and I both find that we're definitely more productive in the afternoons than the mornings, although he's not writing a book. So my set writing routine is to faff around all morning and try and write, but basically just do a lot of laundry and send emails. And then about 2 hours before I know I need to go pick up my kid from school, that's when I get into this amazing flow. And I'm either sitting at the desk in the office, and unless my husband kicks me out, in which case I'm crouched on a couch somewhere with my dogs running around. And then I need to race off and pick my kid up from school. So I actually wrote the majority of this book at nighttime, because there's no interruptions. I can get the office back to myself and I've got no more excuses.
And when you were writing this book, especially like with the research of your past generations' letters and that, was there anything that you found that really surprised you?
I think I was surprised by how raunchy things got in 1918. Yeah, my great-grandfather was, you know, he was really keen to see my great-grandmother again. I was also surprised by how much overlap there was, and that was a really magical process to go through. There were stories that were told 100 years apart and 5 continents apart, and yet there was this amazing serendipity of coincidence where it could just be the way that they described a glass of champagne or wishing on a shooting star, but it happened over and over and over again, this magical sense of coincidental repetition that definitely had me feeling like there was maybe some bigger stuff at play.
Yeah. Know that. Also, I'm wondering, like, you've written the letters as from your own personal experiences, and that. How does the editing go for that? Like, does the editor want you to change things that you've put, or?
Yeah, I think I probably came out of this pretty unscathed, which means that when I go through the editing process for the novel, I think I'm just going to feel really punch drunk.
Yeah, because I would think it would be quite a bit. Yeah.
The editing was more about structural stuff. So, you know, consider taking this bit and putting it there, or considering lighting the tone of this letter and bringing this one down. But it was pretty light on. Apart from punctuation, I work in advertising, so I'm terrible at punctuation. I put M dashes everywhere, and I make up words. But I think I think I'm definitely in for it for the next book, because you can't tell someone to change the story when the story's already been written. Whereas this time around, it's definitely going to need a fair bit of manhandling, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be a lot different experience. Well, thanks so much for talking to me. Hope everyone goes out and checks out 27 Letters to My Daughter. It's an amazing read.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's been awesome to chat to you guys.
Yeah, and thanks for all the questions that oh, I do have one last question, sorry, which I think is a great question as well. Marty wonders what time period your new novel's going to be set in.
I feel like someone knows something that they shouldn't know. It is set in current day. Or is it? Dun, 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 dun. Keep an eye out in 2024 and you'll be able to see the rest of the answer.
Yeah, we'll be looking out for it, and hope I get a chance to talk to you again. It's been great talking to you.
I'd love that. Thanks so much, Jackie.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.